Welcome to Kate's Take from galsguide.org. Each week I talk about a movie that has shaped my life, and I'll teach you how to dissect a movie and find the life lessons hidden within. Hello and welcome to a live recording of Kate's Take podcast. This is our third year recording in front of a live audience at the fantastic Starbase Indy. Today we are breaking down the universal messages in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. With me, as always, on these glorious specials is my husband, Joshua Leach. Yes. So Josh, say hello to the good people.
Hello, and thanks for showing up. And we are by no means Star Trek experts, so we may rely on you guys for a few things here and there. So if you guys have some expertise that we don't, feel free to let us know when we're wrong. But I think we're going to have a good show.
Yeah, and he's usually my go-to Star Trek expert. I am a Star Wars girl. We are a bi-universe galaxy marriage. So it helps. So I'm happy to report at this point, this is the 7th Kate's Take that we have done on the Star Trek series, which is actually pretty cool. It is now tied for our coverage of Star Wars, so, you know, gotta keep them even, right? So we did one on the fan film guidelines. We did 3 episodes covering the various TV shows of Star Trek. We picked like one episode from each of the incarnations and broke that down. And then, of course, we have done now the 3rd movie in this glorious series. So normally these kind of end up being a refresher or going like plot point by plot point through the movie. But I kind of figured I'd preach into the choir. Y'all have seen this movie. Just saying. You know what I'm talking about. So in this one, we're actually kind of going to jump around the movie and talk more about like the messages that are in it. Just kind of like dig into it. So the themes that we're going to talk about are the needs of the many. We're going to talk about the Katra, or the living spirit. We're going to talk about friendship, the 5 basic human needs, and we're going to talk about Ponfar. Yeah, we're going there. We got to talk about the Ponfar that is in this movie, right? So a quick refresher of the movie. The recap of Star Trek 3, it starts with a recap of Star Trek 2, right? So it's actually kind of interesting in retrospect, because doesn't it look like a little blue box instead of a bigger, blacker box, right? Exactly. It kind of feels like you're watching Wrath of Khan on a television. So especially if you're seeing it in the theater, it feels like I'm paying theater prices to watch this TV size. It's a little bit odd. Now, I did some research. Well, in 1983, the year that this movie, Star Trek 3, that we're talking about, was released to theaters, Paramount was experimenting with the sell-through video market. Now, the rental market was very strong. People would go and, rent a movie for a night or two for a couple of bucks. Well, those rental houses, they paid $100 per copy of those, and then you paid a couple of bucks. They hope to get a return on their investment. Paramount thought, why not try something with Wrath of Khan? Why not offer it for sale for $40 and see if anybody bought it? Well, here's the thing. People bought it. So I actually kind of wonder, because this experiment worked with the idea of home video, of owning the video, not just renting it from the rental store and seeing it in the theater, that maybe that little blue box at the beginning of this movie was to get you used to the idea of re-watching Star Trek in your own home. Possible. You never know. The little small screens. What do you think of that idea?
No, I think definitely they were prepping a market, because I know when these movies came out, I always saw them on TV. They would replay them on different TV channels. And
right.
We were not early adopters of the VCR. We didn't have one for ages in my house.
My aunt had to buy us one because she felt sorry for us. She went, you're the only people I know that don't own a VCR, and so she bought us one.
Yeah, and once we got one, I don't recall buying an actual tape for ages.
You just used it to rent.
Yeah, it was always for rentals. We were early adopters on the Laserdisc players.
Of course you are.
We were definitely smart to get in early on the Laserdisc.
Smart. Can I use finger quotes in a podcast? Smart. And then we got married, and all the Laserdiscs came to my house.
Still have those laser discs.
Yeah, we do.
Still have the player too. So, and there's been a couple times now when
You can't find it anywhere else, and we whip out the Laserdisc.
we want to watch a movie.
Thing every 20 minutes.
We don't have the DVD version of it, so
Right.
or the Blu-ray, so we pull out the old Laserdisc and.
Yeah. And you're very happy, and I'm dying inside. Yes.
If you don't mind getting up and flipping the disc, it works wonderfully.
Just saying. So, okay, the actual recap of Star Trek 3 is that Kirk is sad that Spock is dead. Spock's body was sent to the Genesis planet, where the planet was recently brought to life by a growth hormone. Let's just call it a GMO, shall we? So the hope was that the Genesis device that Kirk's ex-gal and son worked on would maybe bring Spock back to life. But we all know it does, so, you know, we won't kid ourselves there, but that was the hope. Now, surprise, the Klingons arrive, and they want this Genesis power because if it can create life, then it can destroy life, right? So the Klingons are like, oh, must have this. So it seems simple enough. But the Klingons are many times, they're morons because they killed the only person on the Genesis planet who had knowledge of this device in an eeny, meeny, miny, mo type fashion. So, geniuses, absolutely. So,
Point of order.
Yeah, I know, right? And so what would you
He
say?
sacrificed himself.
Everyone repeat after me. Klingon bastards.
Klingon bastards.
My son.
There
He
you go.
sacrificed himself.
It was a sacrifice play.
It was, and that kind of takes after his dad in that, you know, he's willing to sacrifice
Right.
himself for others to some extent, but,
He's also like, you're not getting this information.
you know, yeah, well, and you wonder, because Carol Marcus obviously isn't in this movie,
Mm-hmm.
and so then you've got Kirk's son, and then you have Saavik, who
Yeah.
you wonder
Who's
how
new
much
to it.
you wonder how much of it she knows, and so obviously the Klingons didn't think through the whole. But then also they were under the impression that they could just easily just get whatever information they needed from the Enterprise. So
Right.
by killing whoever on the planet was to force their hand into giving the plans that they assumed were on the Enterprise.
Right.
Little did they know that the Enterprise was basically a flying hunk of junk at that point.
Well, you know. Because things happened in the Wrath of Khan.
It did. And they didn't watch that movie yet.
No, they didn't watch that one on the videotape.
They didn't watch
No, not so much. So right before Spock's death, he puts his Katra, or living spirit, into Bones, and it drives Bones a bit batty for the course of the movie. So the mission becomes to get Spock's body from the Genesis planet, to get Bones, to get the body and Bones with Spock's Katra to the Vulcan planet so that they can be put back together again and reunite that mind and body to bring back Spock.
And I like how they did with Bones, how they would have Spock's voice,
Yes, that was nice.
and so it kind of created this like eerie ghost-like thing
Yep.
going on in the background, and I really liked how they did that because it added his quarters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. When he was in his quarters, and then there was the
Scanner.
then when he's at the
Yeah.
scanner console, and so yeah, it really helped to create this effect that almost like Spock's ghost was there that kind of gave the crew more impetus to keep going because they kept
Right.
having these emotional reminders that Spock was still there even though his body was elsewhere.
It's in screenwriting, he was always off camera.
Yes.
So you could hear him, but then you're like, wait, but that's Bones. Wait a second.
that was
Speaking from the director's chair.
I know, right? Always off camera. And then, of course, Leonard Nimoy was literally off camera. Let me just deliver this line from here. So a series of obstacles are put in their way throughout the course of the movie. The arrival of Enterprise at Earth Dock, they are told that the ship is being decommissioned. And they aren't allowed to talk about the Genesis project because apparently it's about as controversial as climate change, is kind of how I was thinking about it. So, you know, you've got to steal your own ship, right? You've got to steal your own ship, then the Klingons are going to break your ship. And then you have to blow it up with most of them on it. And then you have to steal the Klingon ship just to get to Vulcan, right? Perfect plan. I think it's really clear. This could totally work, right? So now I did wonder, I feel like the movies, because we're on the third movie, and we've got, in 2, we have the death of Spock, and then in 3, we have the destruction of Enterprise. Are they trying to kill everything Trekkies love?
Well, they do. This is one of many times they destroy the Enterprise in the movies.
Right.
They do like to blow things up. Even the Next Generation cast got into the whole let's destroy the Enterprise thing.
Let's see what happens.
When they split into the 2 ships and then had the giant saucer crash land. And so it's always a theme in the movie of destroying the Enterprise. I think the captains I think they like to get, it's like with the new car. Every 3 years,
Not by the captain's hand.
every 3 years, there's certain people out there that like to trade in their old vehicle for a new one. Well, they like to every few years destroy the Enterprise, and then that forces them to get a new one.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
This recurring pattern, I
Yeah.
mean, it's not just in Star Trek. Star Wars, you saw in the
Yeah.
most recent movie as well. I mean, so this
Destroying the things you love.
these recurring themes is not unique to Star Trek, just a little side note.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And loss is a big motivator in movies. Like you're saying with the new Star Wars, and they killed Han Solo.
Spoilers.
It's a good motivator. It's a good motivator for people in the characters in the movie to keep going
That it's something new,
to avenge.
fresh.
Yeah, and with Kirk's son, to avenge his death, to avenge the loss of the Enterprise, which you have to ask yourself which Kirk cares about more. The Enterprise,
That's always the question.
The Enterprise or David, his own son. It's like,
Oh no, that one's easy.
because there seemed to be and there seemed to be less mourning. It was almost like a hierarchy of Spock, the ship, and then his son was at it was dead last.
Which can be a little bit sad, and you said dead last. Oh.
Yeah, literally.
I think it was in either Starlog or Sci-Fi Universe, some comment section when the number 3 came out said, "This was so simple. Why blow up the Enterprise? All they had to do was suck the air out of the transporter room."
Oh yeah, there you go. And fully eject. Yeah. Who would have thought?
Well, there's
Simple is right. Yes.
Unfortunately, with this movie, as we'll just see more here, as we talk about it more, there's a lot of stuff that's questionable in the way that they did certain things in this movie. So it's not the tightest story you'll find. So
I would have liked that better though, being sucked out of the transporter. Okay, so let's get into our first big theme or message that is in the movie, and it is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Or the one.
Or the one, there it is, yes, of course. Now this is said quite a few times in the movie. You're almost hit over the head with it a few times. But what does this line mean to you, either in the context of the movie or in context of a universal message or meaning?
well, I mean, the universal message is clear.
It's different to each person, but yeah.
And they have, there's all those moralistic quandaries that you get into of, if there's a bus traveling at a group of people, and if you throw, if you knock a tree over and divert the bus into the other lane, it kills only one person instead of killing 50. Would you,
Right.
knowing that you could affect it in that way, would you kill the one person to save the 50? There's all those moralistic questions that you get into when you get into college philosophy classes.
The zeroth law gets approved.
Yeah.
Right. Mhm.
So,
Better than the first law.
what's the law again? What's the law?
Zeroth law.
Zero's law.
Remember, the first law was a robot is not allowed to harm a human being.
Yeah.
Oh,
It says you
gotcha.
can harm one human being if you do good for whole mankind.
Gotcha. There you
Okay.
go. The needs of the few.
So in this one, it's kind of flipping that whole thing on its
Yeah.
head in this movie, where in 2, Spock sacrifices the one himself to save the entire ship.
Right.
Where in this one, they're risking not an entire ship's crew, but the 4 or 5 of them that go on this adventure to save the one,
Right.
which in this case is Spock. And that's just one of those things, as Spock would say, is a human fault.
Is it logical?
It's
right?
not logic. And that's where humans screw it up. But it's important enough for Kirk that he's willing to sacrifice the ship in order to save Spock. So.
There you go. I see it in the contents of Wrath of Khan. It's a sacrifice play to save the crew of Enterprise, absolutely. I also see it kind of as a universal message when Kirk is negotiating with Krug on the Genesis planet, because it's becoming unstable all around them. And Kirk shouts at him, "You fool, look around, the planet is destroying itself." And
Exhilarating, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, right? But he says, if we don't help each other, that we'll die here. And I almost felt like that was an echo as well of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Because I do wonder, is it a call for conservation? Is it a global question that he's necessarily asking? I also put that layer on it because I know that Leonard Nimoy was kind of a conservationalist. We see it a little bit with the whales in the next one, right? So, I know, spoilers with the whales, exactly. But here, let me see, I'm gonna keep moving here. But then, when Kirk though, when he opens his mouth and he changes it at the end of this movie, where he then rewords it, where the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. I get it. I get that Spock's mind and body needs to be reunited, that Spock is the one with the need here. Also, you could go with a kind of Neo Matrix sort of thing. Spock is the one in this analogy. But when Kirk rewords it, it almost is back to Kirk can't deal with death. Every character has a flaw, but Kirk really can't seem to deal with death. So it does feel like it's more Kirk's need than it is for Spock's need. And of course, I've always seen Kirk as a self-serving character who does not like to lose. Now, he does not ever jeopardize his crew, but he doesn't like to lose. So I would say that Kirk would do anything to cheat, to win, because I feel like he can't deal with Spock's death. And so when he tries to cheat it by sending it to the Genesis planet, that's one way to do it. And then, on Vulcan for a special Kirk win ceremony is kind of what I call it. So I feel like that phrase, his rewording of the phrase, takes it from being noble to being selfish. What do you think of that?
Well, you see Kirk's selfishness in his inability to deal with losing, to deal with death.
Yes. Yeah.
It starts with his solution to the Kobayashi Maru,
Yep.
where he just reprogrammed the computer, so he never had to deal with that no-win scenario.
Right.
And so, in this movie, they reprogrammed the movie in allowing Spock to be reborn. And
Well, you get to write it.
So exactly. So it's just another way for Kirk to escape having to deal with losing, to deal with death. But oddly, you would think he would have the opportunity to deal with death through the death of his own son.
Not so much.
But he tends to just kind of skip right past that. And
Gets it all out at once.
And that's where he basically deals with it in revenge by killing all the Klingons except for John Larroquette.
Right.
Maltz.
Was that?
Maltz.
Yeah.
There you go.
Maltz. So it's his way of avoiding death and avoiding having to deal with the tough issues. And it's the same with he didn't know he had a son for the longest time because...
Right, it was in the last movie.
Yeah, and Carol never told him about it, but it's like they had a relationship and he seemed to kind of run away from that.
Right.
So it's a pattern with Kirk of avoiding the tough decisions as much as possible. And then when you do have to make the tough decision, you find a way to cheat.
Of course, exactly. So I will also add this to it as well, though, because I'll go another layer deep with the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It's actually not the need of just one, of just Kirk or just Spock, depending how you look at it. There was many. There was the entire crew of the Enterprise that wanted him back. They were the many. And not only beyond that, but the audience needed Spock back, you know what I mean? So we were the needs of the many as well. And Bones even says to Spock's, body before the ceremony, I've missed you, and I don't know if I can stand to lose you again, right? So the needs of the many do, in many ways outweigh the needs of the few. So
The needs of the many could also be construed toward the Vulcans.
Yeah, right. Yep,
Because
absolutely.
of
They
what
want their
the,
Spock back, yeah.
Not necessarily Spock himself, but his memories, his knowledge.
Right, yeah, very true. Yep. In a logical sense, absolutely. Should we move on to Katra, the living spirit?
Let's do it.
All right. So I love this concept of the living spirit and that the Vulcans can pass it on before they die. I also loved the use of the body-mind separation that they use within the movie. So the Dalai Lama talks a lot about body-mind connection and how to understand the body and to understand the mind separately. But then also in a complex way to look at it as a whole, how one doesn't work without the other, but yet how each is extremely valuable. It's a complex subject when you start talking about body-mind, but one simple way to think of it is, healthy body, healthy mind sort of thing. So, yeah. So to have the construct and that connection to a person, and I don't want to say human because we are talking about Spock, we are talking about an alien here, but to have that physical body that we recognize just as unique as, as a person. Every person is unique and your body is uniquely yours, just as your mind is. So when one is missing, the person doesn't feel whole. So when the mind is missing, we get zombies, right? There's still the physical person that you remember, but they are missing their minds. So then, and in death, we have the body, but we don't have the mind. We don't have the personality. We don't have the spirit. So the idea of Bones being the keeper of Spock's Katra, or his mind in this case, I think is fascinating, and I think that's probably the best way to really kind of paraphrase it. So here's how I see it in terms of a universal message, something that we can take from the movie and into our lives, is that those that pass on, from our lives, and it does not matter, religious preference, background, or lack thereof, your friends and family that leave you, they never leave your mind. They're always with you. They're still in your thoughts, they're still in your conversations, they're still in your memories. So their living spirit, if you think of it that way, is still within us. They just don't change our voices like they did in the movie. What did you think about the Katra part of the movie?
Yeah, I thought the way they went about it was good. And I thought it was nicely planned out how it kind of picked up from one movie to the next and kept that whole storyline going.
Felt like it was moments later.
Yeah. So you could tell that they had a good plan in place for the bringing back of Spock, as far as their idea of his spirit will still be there. We just have to, where they, in my estimation, they kind of messed it up a little bit was getting the body. Was because the Spock going from being dead to being alive again, there's so many questions that...
You have a lot of questions there, yeah.
Because, yeah, the photon torpedo crash landed on the planet. But it doesn't really explain how Spock went from a dead 50-something guy to a baby to then back to a 50-something-year-old guy. The science there is very flimsy. And for Star Trek, which...
The Genesis effect.
Yes, but...
The Genesis effect.
But so it reconstituted him into a baby, but it didn't do anything to the capsule to the photon torpedo. The photon torpedo is still...
It's not a living energy, though.
The robe that he was in is still in one piece. So
right.
It's just and then with
that part's always weird.
With the microbes that were on the outside of the photon torpedo that then evolved into those giant, or not giant, but the large creatures on the
evolved
worms.
fast.
Yeah. So those just evolved really fast. So
right.
If his cells evolved really fast,
yeah,
then wouldn't there be like thousands of Spocks running around?
Oh, you think they would multiply? I think it's
Because
supposed to be each
Or a highly
microbe that was on there.
advanced
Yeah, there would be
Right.
something different going on
No,
there.
no, because it's divide and multiply. I don't think it's a rabbit situation.
Well, but there was lots of little microbes, and there's lots
Yeah.
of cells that make up your body. Why didn't all his different cells decide to go off and do their own thing?
I don't know.
You know,
Maybe they're
it's very-
saving that for something else.
Yeah. There's going to be a planet with like 75 Spocks
Maybe.
running the thing. But it's just weird that with Star Trek, which is such a science-based show, that
Yeah.
Spock coming back to life was just the science there is very fuzzy.
Right.
And how he's connected to the planet, and the planet's destroying itself, and the planet's going to explode.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you stop Spock from exploding is just you take him away from the planet. Wouldn't he explode too if he was reconstituted with
It
the
could
proto-matter
But
stuff?
it could be another level of interconnection. You know, that mind-body connection where it's, you know, planet and Spock connection. Once those two are separated, it breaks that interconnection between the two of them.
But it leaves way too much room for just making up your own.
And that's why it gets fun.
But as for flimsy science, though, I mean, that's not, there's plenty others, like sound in space. You know,
Right.
That's just another of many examples.
Sound in space is more of a filmmaking trick than
Yeah,
anything,
I mean,
because
it's for
We need it.
effects.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we couldn't relate to, it would look like a silent movie and it wouldn't
Yeah.
sell well.
Right, exactly.
And,
Or you have the
but-
music going over it, so you.
The music helps. That's
Yeah.
another way to
Yeah.
easier do the silence of space than, you know, yeah, this is true.
On the
Yeah.
Contra thing, though.
Yeah.
What about, what you mentioned with the movie, but how about, I thought that was interesting in Enterprise that Captain Archer was bearing the Contra of
Oh, yeah.
Serac as well as Siren.
Gotcha.
That
A 2-for-1
was
special.
interesting.
Yeah,
Let's just
there you
load up
go.
on 'em.
I believe that would really be close to schizophrenia. You got to be very close if you've got multiple living energies in your head.
But the thing, but with Vulcans though, you know, in Siren's case with Archer and McCoy, that was a last-minute desperate thing. But you know, when Vulcans are about to die, you know, the receiver is prepared, you know, for his whole life, you know,
Right.
mental discipline,
Yeah.
you know, and so they can handle it.
It's not so
better.
much a hot potato situation
Yeah,
where it's here, good luck with this.
yeah. Vulcans can handle it.
Right, they're trained for it. It's in, yeah, no, absolutely. I can see that. Okay, should we move on to the Ponfar? Oh, we gotta talk about the Ponfar, right? Yeah, there's a lot of questions. We kind of been talking about it for like a week on and off of the confusingness that is the Ponfar. All right, so when Spock's body is sent to the Genesis planet and the GMOs get a hold of him, because that's how I like to think of it. So he's reborn, and he's like childlike reborn, like you were talking about. So now I can only, you know, assume in the context of the movie that because plant life and the microbes are growing really fast at a rate, that Spock had to start over too. That's kind of how I observe it. I have no idea. And now you had we went through those already. The questions that you had of how Spock. No, actually, this was another one. You wondered how Spock even ate from age 9.
Well, until we
to
see
get to
him-
age 9.
Yeah, until he gets
What was
up
he
to the
eating?
age we see him.
Right.
When he's an infant, unable to move.
Right.
What did he eat or drink? I mean, obviously that would have, with the accelerated growth, that would have
Right.
only probably been a few hours. But still, his cells would have been going a mile a minute. What did he eat? Or, well, Vulcans don't really eat, they just drink. But what
Well,
did
see,
he
there's
eat?
that, yeah.
What did he eat or drink the whole time?
My-
His body had to
yeah.
have consumed something.
My answer is always barely anybody ever eats in a movie. It's one of those things where unless it's a prop,
It could have been,
they don't close doors, they don't live in explosions, and they barely
So-
eat. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things, yeah, you can say sustained by the energy of the planet and things like that. But there's something there, somehow he had to get nutrients into his body for that entire time.
right. Well, maybe, even though we're starting on shaky ground, maybe that's what made the Ponfar so worse. So every 7 years, a male adult Vulcan experiences the Ponfar, which is the time of mating. So luckily, the newly cast Savak, is there to explain this to us of how it's going to go this time around, because it's a little bit different from the original series, from Amok Time. They changed it up just a little bit. So on the Genesis planet, we actually see 5 different ages of Spock. Though when I was kind of watching it, I felt like I was only seeing a few. I felt like I was only seeing like 3 of them. But there's 5 of them. There's age 9, 13, 17, 25, and then Leonard Nimoy, or 53, who was 53 at the time. So for these ages, and we're assuming adult life of Ponfar, right? I'm gonna say 17, because it's probably the less creepy of all the ages. So 17, we have, what is it, Savak or Savik? Savik, I always say, I try to put too much emphasis on a wrong syllable in there. But so she helps him out during the Ponfar with a little finger touching. So yeah.
Creepy.
It feels creepy, but so Nimoy said in his book that scene was the equivalent to holding hands in public. Okay, that's awesome. It didn't really totally play that way to me on screen, but everybody's bringing their own baggage with them when you're watching something. And so you get your own interpretation when you watch something. What it did tell me, just kind of in a visual context of what Ponfar is wow, that seems to suck. And it seems like the worst combination ever of a growth spurt and puberty rage, basically. It was way different than American Pie. That's what I was thinking. What did you think?
Human teenagers complain about puberty.
Right, exactly. This looks worse.
That looked like maddening.
It really did. So that's why I'm like going, I don't know if just, the equivalent of holding hands in public, I don't know if that would be enough when you're raging that hard.
It seemed like with the whole finger thing that there was more going on there than...
Yeah, because I think
It feels like it. Yeah.
No,
I think Ponfar is more than holding hands, as you say, because that was originally depicted in the original series.
Right,
In
as a
Journey
marriage.
to Babel.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So that's why, and that's why I think they were trying to set it up. This will be different, y'all, but I don't know.
But then again, it could also mean that they're being introduced to one another.
Right, exactly.
Because Vulcans are betrothed at an early age.
Right, yeah, there you go. So it's kind of like, an introduction to, I'm just getting you through this sort of thing.
It reminded me of in Forrest Gump when Forrest goes to the girls' college and he's sitting there on the bed with Jenny. We'll stop it there. But that's more what it reminded me of than
Sure.
of anything else. So, I mean...
Sure, everything relates back to Forrest Gump for you.
Well,
Everything.
it's a masterpiece of a movie.
It sure it is. So the last thing we're going to talk about is specifically now with the movies, is how they tie into the 5 basic needs. Did you have something else on Ponfar though?
Yeah, I just wanted to verify, you sort of answered it, but, so it's only Vulcan males?
Right, I did, yes. Adult Vulcan males, yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Females don't have that.
But in a couple of the series that came later, they did. So it seems to be kind of, the canon seems to be either changing or evolving.
Do you remember what ones those...
I thought it was T'Pol.
To Paul.
Lonnie does too.
Yeah.
Voyager does too.
Yep, so I thought there was a few more instances of the ladies.
Yes, when did Paul undergo that?
I didn't see it, I saw it in a wiki. And so I went, all right, so it's happened since this movie.
Okay.
Right, exactly. So, and then, so there was more explanations of the variance when it was for T'Pol, when it was for Spock, too. So I'm like, okay, is that an age thing? Also, it's different creators putting their different spin on it. Being intrigued by the idea of Ponfar, and it's like, all right, let's play with this creatively and see what happens. So, yes. yes.
But males might have it more intensely.
It supposedly that's according to the wiki. We're all making it up as we go along. So yes, did you have one?
Yes, I did. Have you heard the theory that Saavik is,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that she's pregnant with Spock's child?
Yeah, that was in the novelization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why she
Yeah.
stayed on Vulcan
Right.
in the fourth, yeah. And so,
And I'm like, that is a whole different thing then. Because again, we talking 17. Because there's a 13 in there too.
and have you seen the extras where, what's the actress's name? She's talking about.
Robin Curtis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
She's talking about at that scene at the end where he's walking, looking.
And she looks down in
Yeah.
a shameful kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he said, I want you to imagine you've just seen someone you haven't seen in years you've been intimate with.
Right.
And that's how they got that shot.
Yeah, and that's how it plays. So that's why it's like, ooh, that's a load of creepy. But yes, okay, so let's get into the 5 basic human needs. Now, Dr. William Glazer, he actually calls this choice theory. Has anybody heard of choice theory before? I actually learned this in screenwriting. I come from a filmmaking background. So I learned it in screenwriting in the sense of each story needs to focus on one of these 5 basic needs to invoke an audience, to connect to an audience, to mean something to an audience. And so there are 5 of them. The 5 basic needs that are described are survival, belonging, power, freedom, and fun. And in every movie that you see, it'll have one of these elements as the strong overriding theme through it. Now, you've never heard of this either, have you?
Completely blank.
All right, so I will break it down of what they are, and it'll become clear why here in a second. I'm going outside the box, and then I'm coming right back to it. But you're going to start to see these in movies, so I'll focus on the 5. Survival. It's all living creatures are programmed to survive, right? This is kind of the easier one. We all understand survival mentality. It's the most basic, it's the most self-explanatory. Films like Independence Day. Independence Day is primarily about survival. It's the key theme that is in it. Belonging. Now, belonging is being fulfilled by love, by sharing, and by cooperating with others. This includes friendships and includes life partners. So this goes from your rom-com romantic comedies, also goes to your Harry Potter movies. Harry Potter movies are very much about belonging and friendship. The next one is power, and that is fulfilled by achieving and accomplishing and being recognized and respected. So power goes 2 ways. You can think of it in terms of Mr. Holland's Opus is about power because it's about achieving and then being recognized for your achievements. But then it can also swing the other side of the pendulum, and it can be Wall Street, and it can be The Wolf of Wall Street, where it's about power and achievement and greed and money. So that's the different side of that. Freedom is the fulfillment of making choices. So there's the physical act of slavery and imprisonment, like an Amistad, but then there's also the mental lack of choice, which we can kind of see in The Matrix, if you put it that way. So fun. So fun is the last element. That one is fulfilled by laughing and playing, all right? So honestly, for me, this is kind of where Guardians of the Galaxy kind of falls into. It's about fun. There are elements of belonging in Guardians of the Galaxy, but when I kind of look back on the overall, like, what point is it trying to make? It's fun. It's just trying to be fun. This is also the main motif that you see in a lot of comedy movies as well. They're trying to have fun. They're trying to make you laugh. So how does this relate to our exploration of the Star Trek series? Because we have done 3 of these now. 3 of them, and a very interesting pattern actually starts to appear. So Star Trek, the very long motion picture, which is what I call it, I believe that was its full working title, the very long motion picture, that one actually falls on our power scale. It is specifically about achievement. So Spock is trying to receive the Kolinar, right? He's trying to attain pure logic. And so Spock attains his own version of Kolinar by learning how to mind meld with V'ger, and that logic and knowledge are not enough. You also need friendship as part of that as well. And he called for the machine and human to combine. Now, Kirk's drive, his ambition during the film, is the newly rebuilt, of course, Enterprise, right? And he wants to be in power. And there is a power play motif with Decker through the whole thing. And it's about getting respect and it's about getting control. So Kirk gets, of course, control of Enterprise and he outwits his adversaries. But then there's also a power motif in V'ger, there you go. I always want to say Voyager because of spoilers. With V'ger, because its goal is to find the creator and complete its mission, right? And it completes its mission and it is reunited with the creator, which is us glorious humans. So power is the motif there. For Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan, the motif is freedom. Now, freedom, remember, is about having choices. So when we have the Kobayashi Maru, it's about a lack of choices that you have that are beneficial to the most amount of people, right? So it's choosing two really bad options. You have to choose between two really bad options. And Spock sacrifices himself as the solution to the Kobayashi Maru. He saves the ship, but at very great cost. Also, you have the freedom motif with Khan. He's stuck on SETI Alpha 5, right? His choices are 6. Oh, sorry.
No, it's 5, but they think it's 6.
Oh,
because
okay.
he yells, "This is SETI Alpha 5."
But he is very limited on his choices, right? He feels like he is marooned there. So revenge becomes a big theme in the movie. Now, it's important to understand that revenge is also the appearance of lack of choices, because it always feels like with revenge, you have two choices: kill the person who wronged you or forgive them. Those are the two. Guess which one Khan chooses? Or at least attempts to choose, right? Exactly. So, however, what is interesting when you think of it is the freedom of choice and Khan's revenge, that he's choosing revenge. He has to go for revenge and he's trapped in this cycle. His character does die thinking he killed Kirk. So he kind of gets his freedom, in a sense. That's the one choice that I got to make. So now Star Trek, Search for Spock, the one that we are gloriously talking about. That one is about belonging. It's specifically about friendship. So the whole movie is to get Spock back and to go on with the adventure, so the adventure can continue. Yes, it may seem like a missed opportunity to go on a wild wind adventure with everybody in the crew, but if you look at these 5 basic needs, and if you look at, so far they have not doubled them up. We seem to be hitting them and hitting them and hitting them. You need to have one in here about belonging. And the reason why that's important in a overarching series to have one about belonging is because we need to see how the crew belongs to one another, how they need each other, how they cooperate with one another. So the movie really illustrates the importance of the crew dynamic and how much they need each other and how they are stronger together. That way, as an audience, we never want to see them separated. We always want to see them, together and fighting. So that is the 5 basic needs of Star Trek. What did you think of that?
Oh, that's fabulous. That is very insightful. Not ever having heard of the 5 basic needs. No, it's definitely something to look at when you next time you're watching a movie. Which one does this fit into? Is this fitting into? And then it also makes me excited to do the rest of the Star Trek movies to figure out what those ones fit.
Right, exactly. So the next one's about the whales. And we have survival and fun left on our list. So for our answer, you'll have to wait till next year. Dun, dun, dun.
But the nice thing with this one, setting up the whole dynamic of the crew being above all else.
Right, exactly. The center point.
The center point of everything. It gives us nice things to look forward to in future movies, like campfire songs.
Campfire songs.
In 5. Can't wait till we do 5. We could just skip 5, really. I don't think anybody would be upset.
We can't skip
anybody would be upset.
The only nice thing about 5 is it doesn't have anything to do with the others.
Right, see, there you go.
Yeah, so if you don't watch that one, you're not missing out on anything. If you fall asleep during
Logic
the middle
out
of
the
it.
window, done.
Yeah, if you fall asleep during the middle of it, you're not missing much of
The
anything.
half-hour panel.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's all you would miss is a half
You
hour.
can fill some of it with bitching. I mean, when you're like, what did I just do? What did I spend that much time on it? That fills a good 20 minutes too. So that is our glorious take on Star Trek 3. What were you guys' thoughts? What did you guys think of Star Trek 3? Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
First, let me ask, were any of you here for Starbase Indy back in '92?
I didn't live in the state yet, so no, not yet.
I was still in high school. Yes.
Oh, nice.
I was here, but I think I was just here for his Q&A panel.
Yeah. Then you may remember he talked about, when he went to see for the first time the completed Wrath of Khan movie
Right, yeah.
in the theaters, and then at the end when it showed the torpedo on the surface, he was under the impression Spock
That he was dead, he was
gone,
done.
he was dead.
Right,
And then
yeah.
he sees the torpedo and he says, I think I'm going to be getting a call from Paramount.
You think so? You think they left that open on purpose?
And then later some young little girl asked him, have you been getting any calls lately? And he goes, oh, I get calls.
Right.
That was a hoot.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We just watched the documentary Search for Spock the other day.
Yeah, the Netflix.
Yeah, this is
It's
kinda-
on Netflix now. I think it's.
It's not a Netflix original.
It's on Netflix.
But yeah.
So if you have
Once
Netflix, check it out.
You mean the Love of Spock?
For the love of Spock, yes. Did I say for the Search for Spock?
Yeah.
I'm combining two things. Two things at once. So yeah. So what do you guys' thought on with Star Trek 3 as being one of the main themes, friendship? Do you guys feel that? Do you guys disagree with that?
Loyalty.
Loyalty, yeah. Yeah.
I believe that it was part survival because his father came to Captain Kirk and said, what did you do? And I think he did a mind meld and he wasn't there.
Ah,
And there was a moment of frustration, where could this be at?
gotcha.
Yeah, Sarek does.
He was based on the friendship of Spock and Kirk, but he put it in another place in the doctrine.
Right, exactly.
So I see it's based on friendship and survival. The father was concerned about the survival.
Right.
But he
Yeah.
also used the friendship too, so both of them coexist together.
It's almost, a body-mind connection, a mind meld connection to, I can see that. I can very much see that. Yeah.
Because without the mission, then there's no survival for Spock. Does anybody know? I don't know any more about the whole death. So if
The Katra thing?
what in a normal circumstance, and you seem to know more about it than I did, definitely. So when a Vulcan normally dies, they pass their Katra onto another Vulcan, and then the body just gets buried and.
I think.
Okay, because that was my whole question going
I
into
didn't
it.
find it in research,
That's the impression I
yeah.
got, that,
Yeah.
that's how the Vulcans roll.
Because that's what I was trying to figure out of what would have
That should
happened
be on a
if
t-shirt,
if
by
they'd
the way.
showed up to
That's how Vulcans roll.
if they had showed up to the Genesis planet and Spock had still have been dead, then they would have just been retrieving the body and then getting that out.
Yeah, because his dad wanted the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, one of the things I took away from where Spock put his mind in McCoy is McCoy just happened to be the only one available and it was
Pretty
much.
convenient, so
Yeah.
Spock had maybe 2 seconds to make a decision.
Well, in that case, there was no Vulcan to pass that on to. So that was a bit kind of the out of
I don't think he woke up that morning going, you know what, I need to find somebody really good to put
Yeah.
the Katra in. No, it was like last minute survival situation.
Debbie is right, but Spock knew that he was going to die.
Yep.
Oh, did he have a premonition into?
Well,
No.
he knew there was what he was going to do.
Oh, when he was going into the radiation. Oh, yeah.
So the doctor was the nearest person. He had to make
Yes.
a decision, he had to make it quick, and then he went inside to save the ship.
Right.
So he knew that he was going to die.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was his best option to kind of
Technically, Scotty was there as well, but
He was passed out.
he was passed out.
Yeah.
And so was technically McCoy because he nerve pinched him. But I think it works better for comedic effect if you put Spock
Green-blooded SOB.
Yes, it works way better for comedic effect.
Because it also illustrates, to a certain extent, the friendship. You think these two don't like each other, that they're, and it's like,
They
oh,
actually do.
now they kind of
It really
understand each
cements
other
to-
to, walk around in the shoes.
It
Well,
cements to the audience their connection.
Two parts
Yeah,
of
it's a
the
conflict.
two parts of the trilogy, the Trinity rather.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah, well, that's them and Kirk are the three main people everybody always focuses on. So, yeah.
See.
I heard that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no.
Oh,
You're
I
good.
don't know. But yeah, you said the three main, I heard that that represented id, ego, superego.
See, yeah, I wouldn't put it
I can
past.
see
I
that,
can
yeah.
really see that.
That was Roddenberry's.
Yeah, that sounds like very much a Roddenberry thing. Yeah. Which is why these movies are fun to really, especially, actually, the TV series is a lot more fun to really pull apart mythic messages and universal messages and pulling old myths and stories and meaning to. When it comes to the movies, I always have a little bit more of a harder time because I see them as ticket sales. You know what I mean? It's also I'm very jaded when it comes to movie making. I understand that there's a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of powers that be. Paramount really needed these to work. But in the original series, there was some very interesting dynamics that were in there, in creative choices that kind of built on everything that went forward that I love. But we are out of time. My goodness gracious.
6
Thank
minutes,
you.
actually.
We have 6 minutes. I know, I want to make sure if somebody needs to note up in there. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Kate's Take is brought to you by Gal's Guide to the Galaxy. For more information, including links to our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, visit galsguide.org.